An answer that I didn't expect was the propensity to serve. We had heard from early on, why would civilians want to help? They make better money in the private sector. So that was very refreshing to hear. That was just an overwhelming yes, they would absolutely do it. They see the need and they want to be part of something bigger and on behalf of the country.
In June of 2025, Matt Gorick, then the director of the Department of War Cyber Academic Engagement Office, cited a shortage of over 20,000 cyber professionals department-wide, 7,000 of which are essential positions. He said, quote, "We're at a critical point. Cyber talent is a national security imperative." Welcome to the SCI podcast series. My name is Mike Winter, and I am the Deputy Technical Director of the Threat Analysis Directorate in SCI's CERT division. Today we are here to discuss a report SCI submitted to Congress detailing the results of the study by CERT researchers about creating a civilian cybersecurity reserve. Today is my privilege to introduce Chris May, who is the Technical Director of CERT Cyber Mission Readiness, and Marie Baker, who is the Technical Manager in our CERT division. Welcome to the both of you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, well, let's start by giving our audience a little background about you, your journey, and the work that you do here at SCI. And also, please include a hobby or an interest outside of the office, as we are dedicated to serving the public interest, but at the same time, we also enjoy the freedoms this country offers us. So, Maria, please go first.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here discussing this work with you. I've been at the SCI for quite some time. I actually just had my 30-year anniversary with the university and have had quite a few roles on my journey here, starting with a externship in business services through IT. I was an admin coordinator, and as I completed my undergrad and graduate degrees, I progressed through levels of members of technical staff and engineering to where I am today, where I've got most of my experience with the cyber workforce development and cultivation work that we do today, looking at innovative solutions for cyber mission readiness and capacity building.
Excellent. Any hobbies or interests or anything fun?
Probably one of my interests might be true crime, dramas, TV shows, docuseries, things like that.
Excellent. We'll investigate that one a little more as we go.
Oh, I look forward to it.
Chris, Mr. Bay.
Thanks, Mike. I've been here at the SCI for, it'll be 25 years on March 1st. So, yeah, almost a quarter of a century. Prior to coming to the SCI, I was an Air Force communications officer for about 7 years before that, and had a chance to, at the very beginning of when computers and networks really started to become a key and essential part of how the military functions. So that really kicked off, and security towards the very end of my time in the Air Force. There was sort of like the virus and worm of the month. It was every month there was some new big thing that happened, and so that led us to really start focusing on security, and been focusing on that for a long time here. Our mission is focused on really the force generation, force development within the Department of War and other affiliated government organizations and private industry. We have really focused on gap areas where private industry hasn't really got to that particular problem or whatever the issue may be. We try to focus there and then build capabilities, prototype capabilities. Then we try to amplify that by getting it used, and then we transition after we feel it's mature enough for industry or other partners to be able to take it and run it from there. On the what I like to do on the outside, well, I'm a somewhat obsessed Beatles fan and have been pretty much my whole life, and so any new YouTube video or there's a new Paul McCartney documentary coming out on February 27th. Everybody, anyway, that'll be something I look forward to watching.
Excellent.
Love the Beatles.
I look forward to Paul and Ringo listening to this podcast.
There you go.
So, as I mentioned up front, we are dedicated to serving the public interest, but at the same time, we like to have fun. So, I'm going to start with a few fun questions before we jump into the Cybersecurity Civilian Reserve. So, Marie, first up for you. So, as a technical manager at SCI, what true crime podcast or TV series resonates with you and in terms of the similarities between case investigations and research?
I don't know if any one in particular resonates. I'm a wide fan of all of them. I would take that back, particularly ones that have a solution, a closed ending. I'm not a fan of the disappearance and he just ran out of avenues. The correlation between, research work and evidence, that methodology of finding receipts and information, data, synthesizing that, analyzing it to be able to come up with a, formulated conclusion. It's nice to have that overlap between those two works.
That's great. No cold cases.
No cold cases. Yeah, there's a few popular ones out there that I'm sure we all hear about all the time that are kind of haunting. Like, how could there not be more evidence, more data to find? So
that's excellent.
Not a fan of non-closures.
That's excellent. Chris, as a tech director at SCI, which Beatle can you most relate to?
I'd say Paul McCartney.
Ooh, good pick.
And the reason is Paul was kind of the engine behind always getting the others in the studio. He was probably one of, or maybe the most creative of all of them. And he was just sort of the person that orchestrated their talent to create what they ended up being able to, maybe the best catalog of music in the history.
Agree.
So I see that as sort of my role too. I've got some amazingly talented people who work with me. And my role is sort of, again, to orchestrate their talents, apply them to these gap area problems, and then spark their creativity so that way, we are looking for solutions that are not out there yet. Yeah. We are trying to discover things that have not yet been discovered. And so that's really what my role is to keep them focused on what's new, what's different, what's creative, and how we can solve problems in a creative way.
That's excellent. Well, I'll be your Pete Best today.
Props to Pete.
Yeah. So the reason I'm doing the interview, I'm retired, just like Chris. I'm sorry, I served in the Air Force, and my last 4 years were at Cybercom. So this topic that Marie and Chris research is very near and dear to my heart. So one thing before I do the transition, this probably is the first known podcast that we have the intersection of software engineering, the Beatles, and true crime. So if you're in any one of those, I think this is the right podcast for you. So I'd like to set the stage for talking about the Civilian Cybersecurity Reserve Corps. What was the catalyst of this idea, and why did the Department of War ask SCI to conduct this study? So let's start with you, Marie.
So the department was tasked through the fiscal year 23 National Defense and Authorization Act to partner with a FFRDC or an nonprofit to conduct an independent assessment on the feasibility and advisability for creating and maintaining a civilian cybersecurity reserve that would be available to help the Department of Defense for any significant cyber problems or other workforce issues. So the SCI, as being one of those FFRDCs with experience in cybersecurity, workforce management issues, they reached out to us. So our team had a couple interviews with stakeholders on that end to talk about how we would go about conducting the research and our findings, some of our methodologies. We gave them samples of research we did in the past related to cyber workforce development issues, and we're happy to hear when we were awarded the work. It was great news.
That's excellent. Chris, anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. I think she covered it.
Excellent. Well, let's dive deeper into the work. Let's investigate it a little bit more here. So, from a fun perspective, Chris, what is a Beatles song that you would serve as the background track to this actual report?
The Long and Winding Road.
And why is that?
Well, think of it like a road going up a hill or a mountain, and then plateauing for a little while, and then racing down to the finish line. So that was kind of our experience. We started off, and there was a lot of ground to cover, and it was sort of we were climbing the hill via switchbacks. So there were a lot of twists and turns in the beginning to make sure that one, our methodology was going to be effective. And two, we had the right people doing the right portion of the study. So that's kind of how it started. And then once we got ourselves really well organized, then it was really, okay, gangbusters, let's get the people, let's get the data collected, and then let's analyze that data and then write the report. Excellent. So to be a little more specific with that part, the first thing when it comes down to after we got ourselves organized and tasked, was a literature review. So there's surprisingly, there was a lot of government reports to Congress, different studies that were out there, some by federal research labs, some by academic institutions. And, they had already covered a lot of the ground, but they hadn't done it very much in an empirical way. So there wasn't a lot of data collection and analysis in the previous attempts to answer some of these questions.
Okay.
And that's where I think we recognized as we were doing the literature review, we recognized that was a gap. Is that there wasn't a lot of data that was collected and reviewed. It was more kind of, these were experts in the field who had domain expertise and worked in the department, but kind of went on what they thought was right. That's one thing that focused our efforts next. So after we did this really comprehensive literature review, and then we analyzed that, what we did with all the literature is we kind of combined or found themes or areas where there was a significant amount of evidence, at least in the literature, pointing in this direction or that direction. And we wanted to explore those more empirically, like I said. So we did that in a couple of ways. The first was we started working on a survey instrument. We actually built two of them, and the department was only allowed to use one of them. But the survey was really a 16-question Likert scale type of survey. So agree, strongly agree, neutral, strongly, or disagree and strongly disagree. And each of those were correlated, obviously, with a number, 1 through 5. And so we were able to build not quantitative data, because it wasn't really, it's based on people's responses to specific prompts, but qualitative data that we could treat as empirical data nonetheless. So that was really something that helped us a lot. We were able to get our partners in the Department of War to publish this survey, and we had almost 1,600 respondents to this survey. And so that left us with an awful lot of data for us to analyze. So that was really a really important part of it. We really wanted to ask the right questions that would give us, without kind of giving them, pointing them in any direction. So that was actually a little tricky to make sure those prompts were going to not be push them in any direction, like I said. Then after that, we did over 50 Zoom, online meeting interviews that we transcribed, and the people we interviewed were all over the map when it comes to people from industry, leaders in industry, former admirals and generals who were commanders of the cyber in Cyber Command and in the component commands of Cyber Command, congressional staffers, operators, current operators and retired operators within the military, all throughout the scale across the spectrum. And we asked them the same questions, each of them, and recorded their answers. And then again, we tried to collect commonalities and anything unique in their responses, and then be able to analyze that as data. Again, qualitative data, but it helped us to really be able to have some empirical method when we actually got to that point in the study, which was kind of that plateau. I mean, that was a little bit flat in that zone because we had a lot of data that we had to study and analyze. And then when we got to the report writing in the end, because we had processed all of this and followed this methodology, we were able to kind of speed up, and the report writing kind of got better, faster, quicker as we went along.
Wow, the scope and scale of that is really impressive, and what we would expect of an FFRDC too. So very well done on that. Well, Marie, Chris mentioned the methodology behind the report, and I talked about the survey and a number of questions that were asked to the 1,600 respondents. So could you give us an appreciation of some of the questions that were asked and the scope of the questions?
Sure. So within the NDAA, there were 10 elements that we were tasked with assessing as part of the feasibility and advisability question. questions such as, is there propensity to serve, clearances needed, types of pay, resources, authorities, things like that. So we formed the interview questions for a lot of the people we spoke to, as well as the survey questions around those elements to kind of get their feedback into those, as well as Chris said, a lot of the past literature talked about this, looked at this issue before, different organizational models of handling cyber in the department, and a lot of them, it was described in one of the reports, is this a solution in search of a problem? So what we needed to get out of a lot of these interviews was, where are gap areas that a CCR would be a solution to help fill? Where do you have capacity issues, capability issues? So getting that information out of the interviewees, and the propensity to serve questions and things like that. So that's where we kind of had the interviews and surveys lining up to help form those insights.
That's excellent. Well, let's talk about the findings from your information gathering and analysis from these 1,600 respondents that came back. So what were some of the challenges or other common themes that you all identified?
There was significant commonality in certain areas. One was almost unanimous, was that a CCR would need to have access to classified information to be useful. And part of that rationale for that was that almost all of the planning for cyber response for hunt missions, hunting being, discovering vulnerabilities or discovering breaches, anything related to kind of operations, cyber operations, either offensive but primarily defensive in nature.
Yeah.
All of that stuff typically happens within either a SCIF, which is a secure classified information facility, or using a classified network like CIPRNet or JWICS. These are closed loop military networks, and so not allowing the civilians to be able to access any of that. Maybe they don't need top secret for everything or whatever, but some level of classified access was almost unanimously said this is important. So that kind of presented itself in some of the literature, but we really wanted to confirm, like, is that legit?
Yeah.
And it was, I think the response rate, well, the agree or strongly disagree with having a clearance was above 90%.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Marie, anything to add?
I would highlight, as Chris said, some of the challenges were that agreed upon were common things that we're seeing in these NDAA elements: the security clearance, the ability to access, restricted networks. What authorities would they be under to operate? So we were able to have a lot of these interviewees kind of confirm a lot of these challenges, like what missions would they actually do that we don't actually have now that wouldn't conflict with others. Do you have other challenges? I'll talk about common things.
I think challenges, some of them were just day-to-day logistical type of things.
Yeah. So,
for example, if you need to get access to classified information, you're not going to do it from your house. You're going to have somewhere to go. So go on a military base or post. Have access to to get physical access to the facilities or the buildings,
right,
and then access to the network resources, maybe a CIPRNet terminal, for example. All of those are like just sort of logistical issues that are challenges that need to be kind of solved if these CCR members were to exist.
Yeah.
And there were other challenges that were like, is the Department of War the right place for this to exist?
Yeah.
Maybe this should be in the Department of Homeland Security. There were a lot of concerns, a lot of particular senior leaders in congressional staffs, former admirals and generals, etc. They're very, very concerned with the vulnerabilities in the United States critical infrastructure sectors, because the military relies on all of them, or most of them, right, in some way, or would be dramatically impacted by some kind of threat that would be realized in those critical infrastructure sectors. So with that, you also are kind of there presents its own challenges, right? There were those common challenges and threads. We record all those and kind of present a lot of the data that we found, that we presented in the findings, was almost all the data was based on the responses in the interviews and in the surveys.
Okay. Well, Marie, were there any equivalents of like a big twist during your research, something that changed your view once you saw it from a true crime podcast perspective?
An answer that I didn't expect, that was kind of like refreshing, and was the propensity to serve. We had heard from early on, why would civilians want to help? They make, better money in the private sector and have, would they want to serve? So it was surprisingly refreshing to hear in the interviews the amount of people that really did want to serve just for the part of serving their nation and wanting to work with other experts. So that was very refreshing to hear. That was just an overwhelming yes. They would absolutely do it. They see the need and they want to be part of something bigger and on behalf of the country.
That's excellent.
Yeah,
really
that was a plot twist, right? We were a little bit wondering, like, you got all the, especially the generation that's the Gen Z and others. Do they really care, or would they even consider, getting involved with the Department of War, for example? And we were very pleasantly surprised that there was a huge amount of, and we learned a lot too. For example, every year there's the Black Hat DEF CON conference out in Las Vegas, right? Well, there's, in the country, one of the most vulnerable critical infrastructure sectors is the water, public water, whether treatment or just supply of water, right? And we didn't know this, but we found out that there's a whole group and a somewhat long-standing initiative from Black Hat hackers that will go out and conduct an assessment of township level water facilities and provide mitigation, vulnerability assessments and then mitigation recommendations, and in some cases even support if requested. So, those are, you're not going to find too many cyber professionals anywhere near a water facility, right? And so it was good to see that even some of the people that might have like green and purple hair spiked 10 inches above their head are interested in giving back and securing the country. That was really refreshing.
So much so that DEF CON Franklin project he's speaking of, they had to stop taking volunteers at some point. There was just that level of interest, which we said was refreshing.
Yeah.
That's really nice to hear, too. We all work at SCI, and you don't have to go very far, a few doors down, and we were just flush with youthful and young talent. A lot of folks are straight out of college, serving the public interest via an FFRDC, and it's just really great to see. And these young men and women are more capable than I could ever imagine. So it's just really, really great to hear that. I understand that there were two dimensions the Pentagon asked to assess were feasibility and advisability. So can you tell us a little bit more about the findings as to whether the CCR is feasible and or advisable?
So in the feasibility section, it had to do with, is there a need? People claim there is, but is there really a no-kidding need? So one of the statistics that came out of the survey was we just basically asked them that question. Would there be value in establishing a CCR and letting that organization assist the Department of War with its cyber missions? Whether more typically, we're talking about defensive missions, but not necessarily. There are retired or separated, cyber offensive operators that typically make a ton of money working for, for tech firms or government contractors, but they don't get to do the cool things that they got to do when they were in uniform.
Right.
And so they would love to have an opportunity maybe to get back into that, doing those kind of things, right? And that was one of the strongest sources of the willingness to serve, was like former members of Cyber Mission Forces teams who were no longer in uniform, but wanted to still provide security support for the country. That was really great. So that was the one question we had to get to first. Is it feasible? The second one was what Maria's been referring to, is this thing as propensity to serve. Okay, so there 82% of those surveyed said that this would be valuable, and we think it's a significant amount of the surveyed audience said yes to that question. Then we had to say, well, okay, well, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Is there actually a significant number of expert level? We don't want to just get people that need to come in and get a ton of training. We want expert level people to be a part of the CCR so that you don't have to, the department wouldn't have to send them off to schools and do all the workforce development type of things that they're already doing. They would actually be relieved of that effort, right? And so, yeah, I mean, as we've stated, there is a significant population of expert level people, both in private industry, former members of the service, or just general researchers at just like at FFRDCs. A number of the folks here in the SEI would be like, sign me up.
Yeah.
We'd love to take part in that,
Yeah.
And the final thing within the feasibility section was under what conditions and within what mission parameters would a CCR be most effective and provide the most value, right?
Yeah.
So we studied this very carefully. The reserve components of the military. So that's typically the National Guard, and for the states, and the Air Force Reserve, the Navy has a reserve, the Marines have a reserve, and so does the Air Force. Sorry, the Army, and so they do a lot of this work. They're basically there to supplement and backfill the active duty forces performing these cyber missions. And so that's what they train every single time they go into drill, their annual training in the summers. That's what they do. And they do it well. And the number of qualified units and individuals are growing dramatically. So that was the other question.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you already have this capability and capacity, right? What the heck would these CCR members do that are not currently already being done by those reserve component forces?
Right. You already have this capacity. You already have this capability. And it sounds like these folks have a civic duty. They have this sense of calling to want to be doing something bigger than themselves.
Yes.
So I mean, I'm getting pumped up thinking about it right now. Like, I want to go control it, delete something as soon as the podcast is over. So I don't know about you guys. But
That was common with a lot of the interviewees. But like Chris said, the feasibility part was, is there a need for something? And is there these people willing to do that? So that was important to gather and synthesize that information and come up with that part of the feasibility answer.
That's excellent.
And specifically, the answer to feasibility was, we found that it is feasible for the Department of War to establish a civilian cybersecurity reserve. Again, under certain conditions. And what are those conditions?
Advisable under certain conditions.
Yeah, and whether it's advisable. But some of them, one of the things that's under the feasible question mark was basically they should not duplicate anything that's currently done by the reserve component. As long as they don't duplicate, or they supplement or provide the level and degree of expertise that you may have trouble finding in the reserve components, that led into, well, is this then advisable to do? And those questions.
It sounds like we have all the right ingredients for something special to happen. So in the spirit of the Beatles, let's grab a Beatles song. Chris, finish this sentence. All you need is blank. To make a civilian cyber reserve work.
Yeah, I'd say all you need is a champion within the Department of War. You need to have an office or an individual with significant clout and authority to be able to, and budget authority too. To be able to say, if we really want to do this, we're not going to just make this some tiny little nothing. Maybe a first pilot should be small to get the kinks worked out. How are they going to operate? How are they going to assemble? All these kind of things. But the one thing that is impacting everybody in this field, and literally everybody within the American society and across the world, is two letters. We all know those letters. AI. Artificial intelligence, we're seeing every month just dramatic shifts in what AI can do, what it is doing, and what the impacts are on the workforce. And they're just revealing themselves so much more quickly as that technology is is developed and is implemented. So to me, in my mind, the bulk of the talent when it comes to AI and expertise is going to be largely outside of government,
Right.
At least now, at the moment.
Right.
And so, a former colleague of ours that worked with us right here at SEI,
Yeah.
he works at OpenAI right now as an AI researcher, right? He's also a member of the Maryland Air National Guard, So that's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
But what if this person could also serve in the CCR? And one of the key missions of the CCR under the advisability pieces of it would be, well, how do we build more capacity, both within the people in uniform and build more capacity in the CCR to be experts in AI, and specifically how AI intersects with security, cybersecurity.
Right.
So that's one of those key issues, right? Is that we want to make sure that there is a difference, that we're solving kind of a gap, and that if we're going to do this, we're not going to. You can't just have this thing, weighted down by bureaucracy.
Right.
You need to have somebody who's going to be like cracking the whip and saying, "We're going to do this." In my mind's eye, I'm thinking of like some kind of Navy SEAL who's like, "Just get out of my way. We're gonna accomplish this mission and make this thing really work."
That's excellent. Well, Marie, regarding advisability, which was the second dimension of what the Pentagon asked you to assess, did you have any break in the case moments?
I think once we established, as Chris described, it was feasible, that there was a need. We learned that there was these gap areas that could be filled with capacity and capability. There was definitely that, willingness for people to help fill those gap areas. So as far as advisable, the other things that we learned that we applied it to was to make sure that it had its own distinct mission. It's advisable if it wasn't going to conflict with other retention and recruitment efforts for the other reserve and even active components, that folks would participate in this on a part-time basis, that it didn't overshadow other efforts, and also that it had to be attractive to those civilians. There couldn't be an overcommitment in time or resources. A lot of these folks who described their willingness to participate, that was one of their reservations. It depends on, how much time I would have to be away, how much resources, in addition to the talent that they criteria that they wanted to work alongside of, versus just open to any volunteers who wanted to have training and such. So for advisable, we scoped it down to if it could have that distinct mission that was separate from all of this. Like, what would they do that was completely different, and having that strategic reserve of these experts to fill these gap areas that were completely different than these other initiatives that were already going on would make it advisable. There are certainly administrative issues. Of course, we gave them some estimates on resources where it would cost, and some advise kind of like doing a pilot to refine and see how it would work out. But those, I think, were kind of like the highlights with the advisability portion of it.
Yeah, I would just add one thing that was in my mind like an aha moment is there is a willingness and propensity for people to serve, but the key thing to say there is under certain conditions.
Yeah.
Right. And Marie just touched on this, but one of the things that we recognized is that there are people in the civilian, in general public, that would never, ever put on a uniform. That would never be a U.S. federal government or Department of War government employee. They just choose not to do that. But surprisingly, some of these people that we spoke with and in our interviews were able to basically provide, well, under these kinds of conditions, we would be willing, it would be an untapped resource, given that they would never come to the DoD and never serve, or in the Department of War, and never serve the federal government directly.
Right.
Under certain conditions, you're getting access to a talent pool that you just simply wouldn't have access to. And that's a big part of the advisability thing.
Yeah.
Well, hey, you would never get them anyway. This is only going to be a positive. And you could put the conditions under certain conditions that are really important. One that was touched on under advisability was that you can't, as I mentioned previously, you have to have a pretty high bar when it comes to people that you would recruit and retain inside of the CCR. They need to be people that are considered experts or very specialized. So, for example, you may have somebody who's, every day works in a power plant or in a water facility or what have you, right? And those, they have an extremely specialized skill set. But they may not know a whole lot about cyber per se, but a cyber professional married to a person with the critical infrastructure speciality would be a pretty dynamic team. Right. And so under certain conditions, those kind of people could be recruited because of their specialty or because they just simply are some of the very, very best talent on the planet when it comes to cybersecurity expertise, and particularly related to artificial intelligence.
Right. Well, Marie, your report, which was submitted to Congress and published by the SCI just a few weeks ago, included some recommendations. Can you discuss what you think probably the top recommendation was?
Sure. So one of our top recommendations was that they conduct a pilot of a CCR to test the viability of it. We also include a notional model within the report, kind of like how it might be structured to try it out, and to include missions with its sustainment and also incident response, sort of what these folks would be doing. So run a pilot so we can flesh out some of the issues that they might have and refine as necessary. How did it impact employers? Where did they have enough civilians at the right time? How did talent assessment, like getting the right people come in, how did that work out? And for sure, pilot the idea.
Excellent. And I'm now getting questions from our non-existent chat room. And one of the questions that just popped in that doesn't exist is, Chris, if Congress asked you to testify, what would be your Beatles walk-up song?
Helter Skelter. Probably is exactly how I would be feeling at that moment. But then I would probably try to transition to Ringo's take on Act Naturally. Yeah. Which is one of my favorites, by the way. And I guess the reason is because Congress established or directed this study and the report because they wanted answers to some of their questions, and they wanted to know, hey, we think that this could be of value to the country. Everybody just knows that the soft, chewy middle of the critical infrastructure of the country is at risk. Right. You read reports and you see stuff in the news like Salt Typhoon, and these very well-funded, well-resourced, highly skilled adversaries are putting our country at great risk. Yeah. And the Department of War currently does not have any authority to really tackle that issue, right? Within the homeland itself, that's something that maybe DHS would typically be looked to resolve that. However, the very best organization when it comes to training and fielding and organizing and equipping cybersecurity professionals, the backstop of the nation is the Cyber Mission Force and the cybersecurity enterprise within the Department of War. That's where the rubber really does meet the road, and where you have the greatest capacity, right? So I would answer, they would say, is there a need? And I would, some congressmen would probably say, well, what's the deal? Is there really a need? Does this make sense? And I'd act naturally and tell them that, yes, it makes sense. Yes, it's feasible. And absolutely, it's advisable. Yeah. One of the key things, Marie mentioned the advisability of conducting a pilot. That's really about optimizing how this organization would go about recruiting and retaining and organizing and, all of those key elements that we've kind of constructed as a thought exercise within the paper. It's a notional CCR kind of organization. We did that specifically because they asked us questions about cost.
Right.
Well, if we couldn't imagine a notional CCR, we couldn't possibly give them any estimates on cost.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we did, and we described that in the report. I encourage the listeners to really do read the report on some of these things, because that's where we think the value really comes from. I think Congress would be happy to know that this is a good idea. This is very doable. And now it's just a matter of, is there the right level of motivation for the Department of War to really go after it?
I think you might have touched on this a little bit as a follow-up question. What challenges do you foresee in implementing the recommendations? You mentioned costs. What are some of the barriers to entry to some of these recommendations?
Well, I think one of the big ones is like those entry-level logistics issues, right? Okay, so when it comes to organizing these, right now, one of the very good things about, for example, the National Guard, they have a state mission first, and then if the president or there's some kind of crisis, basically calls the National Guard into federal service, active duty kind of federal service, then they can support stuff beyond what they typically would be doing, right?
Right.
Well, that's one of the question marks for a CCR. So, for example, I know where a lot of this talent exists.
Yeah.
On the coast, and particularly the left coast.
Yeah.
Out in California, there is just when you're talking about AI, California has a significant amount of the strongest, most capable people when it comes to AI, and so. If you were able to, for example, set up virtual drills and virtual assessments and virtual training where they could come in and train members throughout the country, whether they're active duty or reserve component forces, whatever, on how best to deal with AI from a defensive standpoint, how you could leverage it to better secure DOW networks, and also how you can leverage it to get after our adversaries.
Well, I can imagine there's a lot of listeners right now that are really excited. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of civilians that are listening to this, getting all fired up. And I don't know if they're doing software updates right now or rebooting the machine. They're just that excited. Follow-up question for you. Does the SCI itself have any resources for civilian cyber operators looking for help in the government space as a temporary,
Well, absolutely. We definitely do. And so do many other of the nonprofits, the other federal labs, and university-affiliated research centers. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations that are sponsored by the government. And one of the missions, the key missions, like I mentioned early on, is transitionability. We do the research, we do the development, but if we just do that piece alone, then it just kind of fades away. So transition to the private sector, transition to the general public is an essential element to maximize the impact of our research. And so some of the examples that we have here, U.S. Cyber Command, Department of Homeland Security, others needed a cyber range and training platform back before the persistent cyber training environment existed, which is now it's a private industry established and run kind of capability. But that's really focused. The PCTE, as it's the acronym is used, is at this current present really focused on the Cyber National Mission Force, the cyber mission teams within the active duty, and in some cases the reserve components. But that resource isn't available to many others, right? And they can't train in a skill-building, hands-on way. And so that was the whole point of us being able to fill that gap at the time. And so we have this platform that we built. It's called the Crucible Framework. It's a platform that is a very mature and established cyber range capability, and it's built for industrial strength. So, for example, the Range Squadron in the U.S. Air Force's the one and only Range Squadron utilizes Crucible as one of its primary mechanisms for doing exercises and training for the Air Force and Space Force and others. It's free. It's open source. The government paid for it. Now anybody on planet Earth can use that capability. It's also very well documented. And there's the other aspect is, great, that gives us a range, but it's really, really hard for people to actually develop content, exercises and training labs and those kind of things. It takes a lot of expertise and talent to be able to produce those. Well, the Department of Homeland Security, specifically CISA, turned to the SEI, to us, about 6 years ago and asked us to establish and then run the President's Cup Cybersecurity competition. So every year we developed, as part of our work support of that competition, 50 to 80 hands-on cybersecurity challenges across offensive and defensive missions, all of them mapped to the NICE cybersecurity framework. And so what we also did for CISA is we built a web application that allows people to go and play all of those. And there's almost 300 of them available right now to everybody with a .gov or .mil email address. They just have to go and they can access them, and it's tons of hands-on great training that's available to them. Beyond that, we also have open source content, right? So people are gonna be like, okay, if I have a .gov.mil, then I can go and play these things, but I don't. So how can I then go after some of that? Well, we were able to, in partnership with CISA and some very wise people in CISA, decided, well, we're not just going to open source this platform we had you create, this competition platform. We're also going to open source all of the content we had you create. And guess what? All of that content is on GitHub, freely available and open source to anybody in the world that would want this. So we have an open source platform, and we have content that's freely available as well.
Right.
And we are working on and getting very close to fielding what we call Content Hub, which is where you go to evaluate what your needs are and be able to just say import, and it'll take your whatever challenge, for example, or cyber skilling lab that you've selected, and it will automatically import that into your environment, whether that's something you establish locally, maybe your community college, or right up in the Amazon cloud or in the Azure cloud. It'll just go import that and make it available to you. Excellent. So those are the kind of transition capabilities.
So Marie, when we bring you back on our next podcast, in the rest of the year, what are we going to bring you back to talk about?
Oh, right now, our directorate's looking into emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. So one of the things we're having is a symposium in March 12th, down in Arlington, Cyber Mission Readiness in the Age of AI. So we'll have a lot of our other technical managers and team leads kind of showing off some of the areas of work we've done with other mission partners and suggesting areas of initiatives where we can help other leaders and organizations as they work to adopt these newer technologies into their workforce. So we'll make sure to include a link to that symposium and more information on that.
Oh, thanks, Marie. Well, if our listeners, including, of course, Sir Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, if they remember one thing from this podcast, what is it that they're going to be talking about in their circles?
I would say tomorrow never knows. And it's truly kind of the case, right? Right now, we can imagine what our jobs are going to be like in the next 5 years, assuming we have jobs, and what society will be like in the future, right? We can imagine it, but tomorrow does never know. But what I would say, as AI really starts to have a dramatic impact on the world, we should really say, well, we should focus on shaping tomorrow now, rather than replaying yesterday over and over.
Excellent. Well, Chris and Marie, thank you so much for sitting down with me today about this important study. So for our audience, we will include links to the transcript of resources mentioned during this podcast, including the blog post on this topic. Finally, a reminder to our audience that our podcasts are available on SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and SEI's YouTube channel. If you would like to see and hear today, if you like what you saw and heard today, please give us a big thumbs up. Thanks again for joining us.